They say death is final, that souls move on and never return. But Cassia had learned that some endings are just pauses in a story written across lifetimes, and some loves refuse to stay buried, no matter how deep you dig the grave. 23 years old, though her soul felt ancient as mountains. That's what happened when you carried memories that weren't supposed to exist, dreams of a life you'd never lived, dying in ways you'd never experienced. Every night since she turned 16, the same nightmare, burning alive while someone screamed her name. Except it wasn't her name. It was Alira. Cassia pressed her palm against the frosted window of Thornhaven Palace's servants' quarters, watching her breath fog the glass. 7 months she'd been here. 7 months of this gnawing feeling that she'd come home to a place she'd never been. The palace felt familiar in ways that defied logic. She knew which floorboards creaked before stepping on them, which corridors caught the sunrise, which roses in the garden bloomed first each spring, though she'd arrived in winter. The other servants thought her strange. Quiet Cassia, with her faraway eyes and habit of staring at places like she could see ghosts. Maybe she could. Sometimes when she walked the eastern wing, she swore she heard laughter echoing from empty rooms, felt phantom touches on her shoulder, smelled jasmine perfume, though no flowers grew nearby. Stop being morbid, she whispered to herself, tying her dark auburn hair back with practiced efficiency. Just a servant. Just a girl who took this position because the palace paid better than the textile mills back home in Millbrook. Nothing more. Except for the dreams. Except for the way her chest ached when she passed the portrait gallery, though she'd never dared enter. Except for the inexplicable terror that gripped her whenever she saw wolfsbane flowers, their purple blooms making her hands shake with remembered agony she'd never actually felt. Her roommate, Petra, burst through the door with characteristic chaos. Morning shift starts in 10 minutes. Cook will have your head if you're late again. She paused, studying Cassia with concern. Another nightmare? The same one. Cassia pulled on her work dress, simple gray wool that marked her as part of the cleaning staff. Burning. Someone crying. The usual. You should see a healer. Those dreams aren't natural. Nothing about Cassia felt natural. She'd been born during a lunar eclipse. Her mother died in childbirth, and she'd grown up with her grandmother, who whispered about old magic and soul debts. When grandmother passed last year, her final words had been cryptic. When you smell the cedar and frost, you'll understand. Find Thornhaven. Find what was lost. So here she was, following a dead woman's riddle, working in a palace that felt like a memory, plagued by dreams of a life that wasn't hers. I'm fine, Cassia lied, heading for the door. Just tired. The palace was already buzzing with activity. Dawn hadn't fully broken, but servants moved through corridors like industrious shadows, preparing for another day. Cassia had been assigned to the West Wing guest chambers that rarely saw use. Easy work, quiet work, exactly what she needed. Until she turned the corner and nearly collided with the head steward, whose face had gone pale as parchment. Change of assignment, he said tersely. King's private chambers, immediately. Cassia's heart stopped. But I'm not trained for. The king requested someone new, someone who doesn't know. He trailed off, looking haunted. Just go. 3rd floor, eastern wing. And girl, his voice dropped to a whisper, don't ask questions, don't stare. And whatever you do, don't mention the late queen. The late queen. Cassia had heard whispers, of course. King Aldrich Ravenshade's mate had died 7 years ago, under mysterious circumstances. Since then, he'd become known as the Frozen King, a ruler who performed his duties with mechanical precision but never smiled, never laughed, existing rather than living. Some said his wolf had gone silent from grief. Others claimed he still spoke to his dead mate's ghost. Cassia climbed the stairs with mounting dread, her feet carrying her toward the eastern wing like she'd walked this path 1,000 times. The corridor grew quieter, more isolated. Portraits lined the walls, kings and queens from centuries past, but she kept her eyes forward, fighting the strange pull to look. To remember things she'd never known. The king's chambers stood at the corridor's end, double doors of dark oak carved with wolves and crescent moons. Her hand trembled as she knocked. Enter. The voice was deep, rough, like stones grinding together. A voice that had forgotten how to express anything but command. Cassia pushed the door open and stepped into the most painfully familiar room she'd never seen. Large windows overlooking mountains she'd dreamed about. Furniture arranged exactly as she knew it would be. And there, Standing by the fireplace with his back to her was King Aldrich Ravenshade. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair black as midnight falling past his collar. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her, just stared into flames that cast his shadow long across the floor. "Clean quickly and quietly," he said, his voice carefully empty. "I have meetings." He turned. Their eyes met, and the world stopped breathing. The crystal goblet in King Aldrich's hand shattered. Blood welled from his palm, where glass had bitten flesh, but he didn't seem to notice. He stood frozen, his eyes storm gray, with flecks of amber locked on Cassia, with an expression somewhere between horror and desperate hope. "No," he whispered, the word breaking like something precious and irreparable. "No, this isn't. You can't be." Cassia couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because looking at him felt like falling and flying simultaneously, like finding something she'd been searching for her entire life, without knowing she was lost. Her chest ached with recognition so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "Your Majesty, you're bleeding." She moved instinctively toward him, her hand reaching out. "Don't." The command cracked through the air like a whip, stopping her mid-step. His face had gone from shocked to stone cold. "Don't touch me. Don't." He inhaled sharply, and something flickered in his eyes. Confusion. Pain. His nostrils flared. "What are you?" I'm just a servant, Your Majesty. I was assigned to. You're sent." He took a step toward her, then stopped himself violently, as if fighting invisible chains. "How do you smell like?" He couldn't finish the sentence. His hands were shaking. Cassia felt it then, a pull so strong it was almost physical, drawing her toward this man she'd never met but somehow knew. Her skin hummed with awareness. The air between them crackled with something she couldn't name. "Like what?" she asked, though some part of her already knew the answer. "Jasmine and summer rain." His voice was barely audible. "Cedar smoke and wild honey. Exactly like." He turned away abruptly, gripping the mantle so hard his knuckles went white. "Get out. Your Majesty, get out." The roar was pure alpha command, laced with something primal and desperate. The windows rattled. The flames in the fireplace surged. Cassia fled, her heart pounding, her mind reeling. She made it to the servants' stairwell before her legs gave out. She sank onto the steps, gasping, trying to understand what had just happened. He'd smelled her, and somehow, impossibly, she'd smelled like his dead mate. Over the next week, strange things began happening at Thornhaven Palace. Things that had been dormant for 7 years suddenly awakened. The Queen's rose garden, which had withered and died the day Alira Ravenshade perished, suddenly sprouted new growth. Green shoots pushed through frozen earth. Servants whispered about seeing lights in the abandoned Queen's chambers. The King's wolf, which hadn't been heard from in years, began howling at night long, mournful cries that echoed through the mountains. And Cassia's dreams intensified. Now she didn't just burn, she remembered. A wedding ceremony under the full moon. Dancing in a great hall. Making love in the very chambers she'd been sent to clean. And a face, King Aldrich's face, younger, softer, filled with joy as he whispered, "My Alira, my soul, my eternity." She woke screaming, Petra shaking her shoulders. "Cassia, Cassia, you were crying in your sleep. You kept saying, 'I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to leave you.'" But Cassia had never left anyone. She'd never even been in a relationship. Or had she? 3 nights after their first encounter, Cassia was finishing her shift when she felt it, that pull again, stronger than before. Her feet carried her toward the eastern wing without conscious thought. Toward the Fae, portrait gallery she'd always avoided. The moon was full, its light streaming through tall windows to illuminate paintings of Thornhaven's rulers. She walked past them all until she reached the end of the gallery, and there she was, Queen Alira Ravenshade, oil on canvas, wearing a silver dress that caught moonlight like water, dark auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, green eyes bright with intelligence and warmth, and a smile genuine, radiant, full of life. Cassia stared at the face she'd been seeing in mirrors her entire life. They were identical. 7 years, came a voice from the shadows. Cassia spun to find King Aldrich emerging from the darkness, his face haggard, his eyes haunted. 7 years I've lived in hell. 7 years I've felt half dead, walking through my life like a ghost. And then you appear, smelling like her, looking like her. His voice broke. Who sent you? What cruel joke is this? I don't understand, Cassia whispered, staring between him and the portrait. I don't understand any of this. Neither do I. He moved closer, each step measured, as if approaching something wild that might bolt. But I can smell it on you. Her soul. My mate's soul. Jasmine in summer rain, and everything I lost when she died. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough for her to see tears glistening in his eyes. Except Alira is dead. I held her body. I buried her in the royal crypts. I felt the mate bond sever like someone ripping my heart from my chest. I have dreams, Cassia said suddenly. The words tumbled out uncontrolled. Every night since I turned 16, burning alive, someone screaming. A life that isn't mine but feels more real than the one I'm living. And when I came here, to this palace, everything felt familiar, like coming home to a place I've never been. Aldrich swayed, like she'd struck him. 16. You started dreaming when you turned 16? Yes. Alira died 7 years ago. His voice was hollow. You would have been 16. The implication hung between them like smoke. Impossible. Insane. And yet. Reincarnation. Cassia breathed. My grandmother used to tell stories. Soul debts. Lives that intertwine across time. She said some bonds are too strong for death to break. Your grandmother. Aldrich's eyes sharpened. What was her name? Miriam Ashwood. She was a midwife in Millbrook. But people said she had the old sight. That she could read souls. Aldrich's face went white. Miriam Ashwood delivered my mate. Was there the day Alira was born? She told us. He swallowed hard. She told us that souls who love truly never truly part, that the universe weaves them together again and again. We thought she was just being poetic. Cassia's hands trembled. Before she died, she told me to find Thornhaven, to find what was lost. I thought she meant. I don't know what I thought. But then I saw the job posting, and something in me just knew I had to come here. They stood in the moonlit gallery, 2 people staring at each other across an impossible chasm of death and time and reincarnation. The portrait of Queen Alira watched over them, her painted smile knowing, as if she'd expected this very moment. This can't be real, Aldrich said, but his voice held desperate hope. Souls don't just. People don't come back. Then why do I know that you take your tea with honey and cinnamon? Cassia's words came unbidden, knowledge she shouldn't possess. Why do I know there's a scar on your left shoulder from a training accident when you were 14? Why do I know that you hate formal dinners but love riding through the northern forests at dawn? Aldrich's composure shattered. Stop. Please stop. Why do I know, her voice broke, tears streaming down her face, that the last thing Alira said before she died was, find me again. Promise me you'll find me again. The king fell to his knees like his strings had been cut. A sob tore from his chest raw, broken, the sound of 7 years of grief finally finding voice. She did. Those were her last words. Before the poison took her, before I lost everything. Cassia knelt before him, drawn by instinct deeper than thought. Their eyes met at the same level now. Green to gray, past to present, death to rebirth. I think, she whispered, her hand hovering inches from his face. She kept her promise. And in the portrait above them, in tricks of moonlight and shadow, Queen Alira's painted smile seemed to deepen, as if the universe itself was satisfied with this impossible reunion. The moon had crossed half the sky by the time Aldrich could speak again. He sat on the cold marble floor of the gallery, his back against the wall beneath his mate's portrait, while Cassia sat at a careful distance close enough to hear his whisper, far enough to maintain the gulf between servant and king. Tell me about the burning, he said finally, his voice scraped raw. In your dreams. Tell me exactly what you see. Cassia wrapped her arms around herself, the memory making her skin prickle. Fire. Everywhere. Purple flames that shouldn't exist. I'm in a room, a beautiful room with silk curtains and mountain views. I can't move. Something's wrong with my body, like poison in my veins. And they're screaming, someone calling a name over and over. Alira. They're calling Alira. Aldrich's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. What else? The smell. Wolfsbane burning. That's what the purple flames are, concentrated wolfsbane oil. And pain. So much pain. Not just from burning, but from inside, like my blood is turning to acid. And at the very end, before everything goes dark, I see. She hesitated, the image always making her nauseous. I see a woman's face in the doorway, beautiful. Smiling, watching me die. Seraphine. The name was a curse on his lips. My brother's widow. Cassia's head snapped up. What? Aldrich rose with liquid grace, pacing the gallery like a caged wolf. 7 years I've searched for Alira's murderer. 7 years of investigations that led nowhere. The official report said natural causes, a heart defect no one knew about. But I knew better. I could smell the poison in her corpse, even though no healer could find it. Wolfsbane and nightshade mixed with something else, something that left no trace. Your brother's widow killed your mate? Cassia struggled to follow. Why? Because Alira discovered something. 2 days before she died, she told me she had proof that my brother's death wasn't an accident, that Seraphine had murdered him to seize his estate. Aldrich's hands curled into fists. I didn't take her seriously enough. I thought we had time. I told her we'd investigate quietly, carefully. I didn't know Seraphine had already decided to act. The pieces fell together in Cassia's mind like a horrifying puzzle. She killed Alira to keep the secret safe. And I couldn't prove it. Can't prove it. Seraphine is clever. She's been above suspicion for 7 years. She's even courted sympathy as the grieving widow who serves on the royal council. His voice dripped venom. She sits across from me at council meetings twice a week, and I have to look at her face and pretend I don't know she murdered my mate. Cassia stood, drawn toward him despite every logical reason to maintain distance. Then we prove it. I have her memories. Alira's memories. I can— No! Aldrich whirled on her, his eyes flashing gold, his wolf rising to the surface. You will stay far away from Seraphine. Do you understand? If she even suspects you're anything more than a servant, if she realizes what you are— He couldn't finish the sentence. What I am? Cassia echoed. I'm not Alira. I'm just me. I'm Cassia Ashwood from Millbrook. I'm not your mate. The words hung between them, and she watched something die in his eyes, hope guttering like a candle in wind. No, he agreed quietly, turning away. You're not. Alira is gone. You're just a girl who happens to carry fragments of her soul, who happens to look like her, who happens to smell like her. His shoulders sagged. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. This was a mistake. You should return to your quarters. But Cassia couldn't move, because looking at his bowed back, she felt it a tearing sensation in her chest, like someone had reached inside and squeezed her heart. Grief. Loneliness. A longing so profound, it made her gasp, except they weren't her feelings. I'm not her, she said softly, but part of me remembers loving you. Aldrich went rigid. When he turned back, his face was a mask of careful control, but his eyes betrayed him desperate, yearning, terrified. Don't. Please don't say things like that. Why not if it's true? She stepped closer, following instinct that bypassed conscious thought. I remember dancing with you. I remember the way you'd bring me breakfast in bed. I remember— Her cheeks flushed. The way your hands felt on my skin. The way you'd whisper my name, her name in the dark. Stop. The word was a broken plea. You're killing me. Do you understand? You're killing me worse than when I buried her. Because I'm not fully her? Cassia's eyes stung with tears. Because I'm just an echo? A ghost? Because I don't know what you are. The confession exploded from him. Because when I look at you, I see my dead mate, but I also see a stranger. Because your scent drives my wolf insane with joy and grief and confusion. Because the mate bond should be gone, severed, dead, but something in my chest pulls toward you like gravity, like drowning, like everything I've been missing for 7 years. He ran his hands through his hair, desperate. How am I supposed to bear this? How am I supposed to look at you and not see her? How am I supposed to not see her? They stood 5 feet apart, the distance feeling like miles and inches simultaneously. Cassia's heart pounded against her ribs. She knew with certainty that transcended logic that if she stepped forward, if she closed that gap, everything would change. There would be no going back. I should go, she whispered, but her feet didn't move. Yes, Aldrich agreed, but his eyes said stay. The standoff lasted an eternity. Then Cassia's stomach growled loudly in the silence, shattering the tension. Despite everything, the grief, the confusion, the impossible situation, Aldrich's lips twitched. When did you last eat? He asked. Yesterday. Maybe. Cassia had been so consumed by her dreams and the strangeness of the past week that food had become an afterthought. The servants' meals are at set times and I keep missing them. Something shifted in Aldrich's expression, the king receding. Something softer emerging. Come with me. He led her through silent corridors to a small room she'd never seen, his private study. Simpler than his formal chambers, with worn leather chairs and bookshelves stuffed with volumes that actually looked read. He pulled food from a hidden cupboard. Bread, cheese, dried fruit, wine. You keep food hidden in your study? Cassia asked, accepting the plate he offered. Old habit. He settled into a chair, not eating, just watching her. Alira used to steal away here when she'd skip formal dinners. She hated the politics, the fake smiles. She'd rather read here with me and eat simple food than suffer through 6 courses of performance. Cassia bit into the bread and nearly moaned. She hadn't realized how hungry she was. What was she like? Really like, I mean. Not the perfect dead queen everyone whispers about. Aldrich's eyes softened with memory. Stubborn, brilliant. Had a temper that could melt steel when something was unjust. She couldn't walk past suffering without trying to fix it. He smiled, sad and genuine. She'd sneak out of the palace dressed as a common woman to visit the lower districts. Drove her guards insane. Once she spent the royal clothing budget on winter supplies for refugees, then wore the same 3 dresses for a season while nobles whispered, "She sounds brave." She was fearless. The smile faded. That's what got her killed. She couldn't let Seraphine's crimes stand. She had to seek justice, even when I begged her to wait, to let me handle it. His voice dropped. I failed her. I should have protected her. I should have. You couldn't have known. Cassia spoke with Alira's certainty. Some things can't be prevented, only avenged. Aldrich's eyes snapped to hers. That's exactly what she said, her exact words, the last time we argued about Seraphine. They stared at each other, the line between past and present blurring further. Cassia felt herself slipping, Alira's memories rising like tide waters. She fought to stay anchored to herself, to Cassia, even as another life's worth of love and loss threatened to overwhelm her. I should go, she said again, setting down her half-eaten food. Before someone notices I'm missing. This time Aldrich didn't argue. He led her to a servant's passage, ensuring she could return to her quarters unseen. At the threshold, he caught her wrist, the first time he'd deliberately touched her. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm. Both gasped. Your Majesty, she breathed. Aldrich? He corrected softly. When we're alone, you call me Aldrich. You always did. I'm not her, Cassia insisted, even as her hand turned in his grip, palm meeting palm, fingers interlacing like they'd done it 1,000 times before. I know, he said, but maybe. He stopped himself. No. Never mind. Go. Rest. And Cassia, he used her name for the first time. Stay away from the east courtyard tomorrow at noon. The council meets there. Seraphine will be present. It was a warning, a protection. And Cassia knew she should heed it. I will, she lied, because Alira's memories whispered of a hidden garden adjacent to the east courtyard. A garden, with a secret window perfectly positioned to hear everything discussed in council meetings. A garden where the late queen used to spy when her husband's advisors tried to exclude her from politics. And Cassia needed to hear Seraphine's voice, to see the woman who had killed her, who had killed Alira. She needed to remember the face from her nightmares clearly, because something in her chest, something that was both Cassia and Alira, and something new, entirely burned with the need for justice. and the certainty that this time, Seraphine would not win. The hidden garden was exactly where Alira's memories promised overgrown with neglect, but still accessible through a loose panel in the palace's eastern wall. Cassia squeezed through, thorns catching her dress, and found herself in what had once been a carefully tended sanctuary. Wild roses climbed ancient trellises, and a stone bench sat beneath a willow tree that had grown dense and concealing. Perfect. Through the willow's cascading branches, she could see directly into the council courtyard where nobles were gathering. She recognized some from her weeks at the palace. Lord Brennan with his perpetual scowl, Lady Ashford who always smelled of expensive perfume, High Commander Thorne whose battle scars spoke of decades of service, and then, sweeping in with calculated grace, came Seraphine. Cassia's breath caught. The woman was stunning silver blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style, wearing morning gray silk that somehow made her look regal rather than subdued. Her face held the kind of beauty that appeared delicate but was actually sharp as knives beneath porcelain skin. The face from Cassia's nightmares. Smiling as flames consumed everything. Thank you all for gathering, King Aldrich's voice carried across the courtyard. He stood at the head of a stone table, his posture rigid, every inch the frozen king the realm whispered about. We have much to discuss regarding the northern border and disputes. Cassia watched him carefully maintain distance from Seraphine, who had positioned herself directly across the table where he'd be forced to look at her. The widow smiled sweetly, playing the role of devoted council member. Before we begin, Seraphine's voice was honey over steel. I'd like to propose a matter of some delicacy. Your Majesty, you've been unwed for 7 years. The realm needs an heir. It's time to consider remarriage. The courtyard fell silent. Aldrich's expression could have frozen oceans. That is not a matter for council discussion, he said flatly. But it is a matter of state security, Lord Brennan interjected, clearly rehearsed. You're the last of the Ravenshade line. If something happened to you, nothing will happen to me. That's what your brother thought, Seraphine said softly, wielding grief like a weapon. May he rest peacefully, but tragedy strikes when we least expect it. Surely you understand the importance of securing the succession? Cassia watched Aldrich's jaw clench. The way Seraphine invoked his dead brother, her own murdered husband, with such false sorrow, was masterful manipulation. I've heard your concern, Aldrich said with forced civility. Now let us discuss the border. There are several suitable candidates, Seraphine pressed, pulling out a prepared list. Lady Margot of House Silverton, Lady Celestine of House Seraphine. Aldrich's voice dropped dangerously low. You overstep. I speak only from care for the realm. She met his eyes with practiced innocence. And from understanding of loss. We both know the pain of losing a spouse. But life must continue. Love can bloom again. The audacity of it, the woman who'd murdered his mate suggesting he remarry. Possibly even hinting at herself as a candidate. Cassia felt rage building in her chest. Alira's fury mixing with her own. That's when she noticed the shadow. Someone else was in the garden. She'd been so focused on the council that she'd missed the figure standing perfectly still behind a rose trellis, also watching, also listening. The figure turned, and Cassia found herself staring at a woman in servant's clothing, but something about her bearing was wrong, too alert, too focused. And when their eyes met, recognition flashed across the stranger's face. Before Cassia could react, the woman moved with impossible speed, clamping a hand over Cassia's mouth and dragging her deeper into the overgrowth. Don't scream, the woman hissed. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to warn you. Cassia bit her attacker's hand. The woman cursed, but didn't let go, pulling them behind a thick hedge wall where they couldn't be seen from the courtyard. Listen to me, the stranger said urgently. My name is Kira. I'm a royal investigator working undercover. I've been tracking Seraphine for 6 years, trying to prove she killed Queen Elira and her own husband. And you? She finally released Cassia, studying her face with shock. You look exactly like the dead queen. Cassia rubbed her jaw, weighing whether to run or listen. I'm just a servant. A servant who's sneaking into the queen's old hiding spot to spy on council meetings? Kira's eyes were sharp, intelligent. A servant who the king personally requested for his private chambers? A servant who made him shatter a glass just by walking into a room? She stepped closer, sniffing delicately. A servant who smells like jasmine and summer rain? The exact scent profile documented in every description of Queen Elira? Cassia's heart hammered. How do you know about? Because I've made it my life's work to know everything about this case. Kira pulled out a small leather journal. I was Queen Alira's personal guard. I was there the night she died. I smelled the poison. I saw Seraphine leaving the Queen's chambers minutes before the fire started. But I was just a guard, no one believed me. They pensioned me off, said grief was, making me paranoid. But you kept investigating. I owed her that much. She was the best person I've ever known. Kira's voice roughened with emotion. And I've been getting close. 3 months ago, I infiltrated Seraphine's household. I found documents, correspondence with a poison master in the southern provinces. But before I could steal the evidence, someone tipped her off. I barely escaped with my life. From the courtyard, voices rose as the council meeting continued. But Cassia's attention was locked on Kira. What does this have to do with me? Because Seraphine knows something is wrong. Kira's expression grew urgent. Strange things have been happening since you arrived. The Queen's rose is blooming out of season, lights in her old chambers. The king acting, different, less frozen, more alive. She grabbed Cassia's shoulders. Seraphine's paranoid. She's convinced the Queen's ghost is haunting the palace. She's hired a witch to perform a binding ritual tomorrow. Night something to trap any restless spirits. I'm not a ghost, Cassia protested. No, but you're something. And whatever that ritual does to spirits, it might do to you too. Kira's grip tightened. You need to tell the king. You need to... A twig snapped behind them. Both women whirled to find Seraphine herself, standing at the garden entrance, a cold smile on her beautiful face. Well, the widow said softly, this is interesting. Kira moved faster than thought, putting herself between Cassia and Seraphine, a blade suddenly in her hand. Stay back. Oh, Kira, still playing hero? Seraphine sked like a disappointed mother. I'd hoped you'd gotten the message when I burned down your apartment, but you always were stubborn, just like your precious queen. You admit it, Kira breathed, finally. Why not? There are no witnesses. Seraphine's eyes gleamed with malice. Just 2 unfortunate servants about to have a terrible accident. Such a tragedy how you'll both fall. From the eastern wall. Broke your necks, the investigation will say. Probably drunk on duty. She raised her hand, and Cassia felt it a pulse of dark magic. Wrong and corrupted. Seraphine wasn't just a murderer. She was a witch. A powerful one. Vines erupted from the ground, writhing like snakes, wrapping around Kira's ankles. The investigator slashed with her blade, but more vines kept coming, pulling her down. Cassia backed against the garden wall as Seraphine advanced. And you, the witch purred. Little servant girl who looks like a ghost. I'm going to enjoy killing you twice. She lunged, hands outstretched, magic crackling around her fingers. Instinct took over. Cassia raised her hands defensively, and something exploded outward, pure white light, brilliant and cleansing. It hit Seraphine like a physical force, sending her flying backward into the rose trellis. The witch stared at Cassia with shock and fury. Impossible. You're dead. I killed you. I'm not. Cassia started, but her voice came out wrong. Doubled. Her own voice layered with Alira's. I'm not the same person you murdered. But I remember. I remember everything. The vines holding Kira withered and died. Seraphine scrambled to her feet, her composure shattered, blood dripping from where thorns had caught her. For the first time, Cassia saw fear in her eyes. What are you? The witch whispered. Before Cassia could answer, a roar shook the palace foundations. Alpha command, pure and absolute, filled with primal rage. King Aldrich burst into the garden in half-shifted form, his eyes pure gold, claws extended, fangs bared. He took in the scene instantly. Seraphine bloodied and defensive, Kira on the ground, and Cassia backed against the wall with her hands still glowing with residual power. You will not touch her. His voice was barely human. You will not even breathe near her. Your Majesty, Seraphine tried to compose herself, slipping back into the role of concerned widow. These servants attacked me. Liar. The word was a wolf's howl. I heard everything. I've been listening from the moment you entered this garden. He advanced on her with deadly purpose. 7 years. 7 years you've walked free while I've mourned. While I've existed half dead, but no more. You have no proof, Seraphine spat, her mask finally cracking. You've never had proof. It's your word against mine, and the council will never believe. I have proof. Kira struggled to her feet, pulling out her leather journal. 6 years of investigation, documents, testimonies. The poison master you hired has been in custody for weeks. He's already confessed. Seraphine's face went white, then red with rage. Then I have nothing left to lose. She threw her hands out, and the entire garden erupted in chaos. Vines and thorns exploded everywhere, a deadly forest growing in seconds. Kira went down, wrapped in crushing coils. Aldrich slashed through them with his claws, but more kept coming. And Seraphine ran sprinting toward the palace interior where she could disappear into the labyrinth of corridors. Kira! Cassia knelt beside the injured investigator, trying to pull the vines away. Hold on. Go! Kira gasped. Don't let her escape. She has a bolt hole in the north tower. If she reaches it, we'll never find her. Aldrich was already giving chase, but Cassia saw what he didn't. Seraphine wasn't heading for the north tower. She was moving toward the old chapel, toward something else. Cassia ran, following instinct and memory that was both hers and not hers. She knew these halls, knew where Seraphine was really going, the royal crypts, where Alira's body was buried, and where, if Cassia's fragmentary memories were correct, the late queen had hidden the original evidence against Seraphine, evidence she'd gathered before she could present it to her husband. Evidence that was worth killing for 7 years ago, and was worth killing for again, tonight. The chapel doors slammed open as Cassia burst through, her lungs burning. The sacred space was empty, lit only by eternal flames burning in wall sconces, but she could hear footsteps echoing from the stairway that led down into the crypts, the forbidden burial chambers of Thornhaven's royal dead. She didn't hesitate, down the stone steps, into darkness that grew colder with each descending level. The air smelled of earth and old magic, of centuries of bodies laid to rest with ceremony and spellwork meant to honor the dead. At the bottom, a vast chamber opened up, lined with marble tombs. And there, at the far end beneath a vaulted ceiling, stood the newest addition, a white marble sarcophagus carved with roses and wolves, Queen Alira's tomb. Seraphine stood before it, her hands pressed against the stone, speaking words in a language that made Cassia's teeth ache. Dark magic, older than kingdoms. You can't open it, Cassia said, stepping into the chamber. It's sealed with royal blood magic. Only a ravenshade can break the seal. Seraphine spun, her beautiful face twisted with fury. Then I'll use yours, because whatever you are, resurrection, reincarnation, some trick of fate, you carry enough of her essence to count as royal blood. She gestured, an invisible force grabbed Cassia by the throat, lifting her off her feet. The witch walked forward slowly, savoring her victory. I should have realized sooner, Seraphine mused. The signs were all there. Roses blooming, the king acting strange, you appearing out of nowhere looking like her mirror image. She tilted her head. Tell me, does it hurt? Carrying a dead woman's soul? Does she whisper in your mind? Show you memories of how I killed her? Cassia clawed at the invisible grip. Choking. Spots dancing in her vision. She was so easy to poison, Seraphine continued conversationally. So trusting. She drank the tea I brought without question. Didn't even suspect until the wolfsbane started burning through her veins. And even then, even as she was dying, she kept insisting I'd be caught, that justice would prevail. The witch laughed. But I'm still here, and she's rotting in that tomb. Not rotting. Cassia gasped out. Sleeping. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. What? She's not dead. The words came from somewhere deep, from Alira's memories flooding through her. Royal wolves don't die. They transition. Their bodies sleep while their souls. Understanding exploded across Seraphine's face, horror and fury combined. Their souls find new vessels. Oh gods. You're not a reincarnation. You're her, actually her. Her soul transferred to a new body. That's impossible, Cassia whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it was true. The dreams, the memories. The way she'd been drawn to Thornhaven. It wasn't coincidence. It was a soul finding its way home. The evidence she gathered? Seraphine snarled. She hid it somewhere. In her final moments, she used the last of her strength to cast a concealment spell. I've searched for 7 years, but she would have hidden it somewhere only she could find, somewhere only her soul could access. The witch's grip tightened, crushing Cassia's windpipe. So tell me, little queen, reborn, where is it? Cassia's vision was going dark, but as consciousness faded, Elira's final memory surfaced clear, sharp, urgent. The hiding place, carved into the base of her own tomb, a hollow space sealed with blood magic that would open only to her touch. Never? Cassia choked out. Then you'll die. Again. Seraphine raised her free hand, dark energy gathering around her fingers. And this time, I'll make sure your soul doesn't escape. A wolf's roar shook the crypt. Aldrich exploded from the stairway in full shifted form, massive, terrifying, more beast than man. He crashed into Seraphine like an avalanche, breaking her concentration. Cassia fell, gasping, her throat bruised. The battle was primal. Aldrich's claws against Seraphine's dark magic. Thorn vines erupted from the crypt floor, wrapping around his legs. He tore through them with savage strength. The witch threw bolt after bolt of corrupted energy. He dodged with inhuman speed. But Seraphine was powerful. More powerful than Cassia had realized. The witch was drawing power from somewhere else, from the crypts themselves, from the death magic soaked into these stones over centuries. You can't win, Seraphine laughed, blood streaming from a gash on her cheek. I've spent 7 years preparing. I knew you'd eventually discover the truth. I knew I'd need to face you, and here, in this place of death, I'm invincible. She thrust both hands out, and every tomb in the crypt cracked open. Skeletal hands emerged, pulling themselves from their eternal rest. Undead. Dozens of them. Ancient kings and queens perverted into weapons. Aldrich fought brilliantly, but he was being overwhelmed. For every undead he destroyed, 2 more rose. Seraphine stood at the center of her necromantic army, untouchable, triumphant. Stop! Cassia screamed. Everyone froze, not because of her command, but because of what was happening to her body. She was glowing. Pure white light emanated from her skin, growing brighter by the second. The undead recoiled, their corrupted forms unable to bear such radiance. And Cassia understood she wasn't just Cassia Ashwood, wasn't even just Elira Ravenshade reborn. She was a vessel, a bridge between life and death. And in this place, saturated with death magic, her light was anathema. Return, she said, and her voice carried absolute authority. Return to your rest. You were not meant to serve darkness. The undead obeyed. One by one, they retreated to their tombs, the dark magic animating them, unable to withstand the pure life force flowing through Cassia. Seraphine stared in horror. No, no, this isn't possible. You're just a girl, just a... I'm justice, Cassia said, walking forward. With each step, her glow intensified. I'm the soul you tried to destroy. I'm every victim you've ever harmed. I'm the balance that's been waiting 7 years to tip. She reached Elira's tomb and placed her palm against the base. The marble split open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, Elira's investigation notes, documented proof of every crime Seraphine had committed. Guards! Aldrich's voice echoed up the stairwell. Now! The royal guard flooded down the steps, Kira among them despite her injuries. They surrounded Seraphine, weapons drawn, iron chains ready. The witch looked between them all, the reborn queen, the vengeful king, the loyal investigator, the evidence that would damn her. For the first time, true fear crossed her face. You won't take me alive, she hissed. Raising her hands for one final spell, Cassia moved faster. She grabbed Seraphine's wrists, and where they touched, her light poured into the witch's darkness, not destroying it, but purifying it. Burning away 7 years of accumulated corruption and death magic, Seraphine screamed. It wasn't a sound of pain, but of loss of power being stripped away, of dark gifts being cleansed. When Cassia finally released her, the witch collapsed to the stone floor, unconscious, drained, but alive. Chain her, Aldrich ordered, his voice still rough from his shifted form. Iron and silver, and post a guard of 20. She doesn't breathe without us knowing. As guards secured Seraphine, Kira approached Cassia with something like awe. You're really her, Queen Alira. Somehow, impossibly, you're really her. Cassia looked down at her still glowing hands, feeling Alira's memories settle fully into place alongside her own. 2 lives, 2 souls. 1 body, 1 purpose. I'm both, she said quietly. I'm Alira who was, and I'm Cassia who is, and together, we're something neither of us could have been alone. Aldrich stood before his mate's tomb, his massive wolf form slowly receding to reveal the man beneath. He was shaking from battle, from emotion, from 7 years of grief finally finding release. The bond, he whispered, pressing his hand to his chest. I can feel it again, weak, new, but there. The mate bond is reforming. Cassia felt it too, a golden thread stretching between them, fragile as spider silk, but growing stronger. Not the same as what he'd shared with Alira. This was different. Earned. Not fated. Chosen. Not given. I'm not exactly who you lost, she said, needing him to understand. I have her soul, her memories, her love for you, but I also have 23 years of being Cassia. I'm not asking you to pretend I'm her. Aldrich crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. He cupped her face with hands that trembled, his eyes searching hers, seeing both past and present, loss and hope. I don't want Alira back, he said, the words breaking something open in his chest. I want you, whoever you are, whatever combination of souls makes you real. I want the woman standing before me right now. Even though I'm a servant? Even though I'm nobody? You're not nobody. His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You're the soul that refused to let death be the end. You're the woman who fought for justice from beyond the grave. You're the miracle I stopped believing in. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of salt and iron and hope. And in the crypts beneath Thornhaven Palace, where death had reigned for 7 years, life began blooming again. Above them, unnoticed, the marble of Alira's tomb started to crack, not from dark magic, but from something else. From a soul that no longer needed its sleeping body. From a queen who had finally, truly, come home. The healing wing of Thornhaven Palace worked through the night. Freed prisoners from Seraphine's network, injured guards, servants suffering from shock all received treatment while healers moved between beds, with practiced efficiency. Cassia sat beside one bed in particular, holding the hand of an elderly woman who'd worked in Seraphine's household for years, never knowing her employer was a murderer. The woman kept crying, disbelieving that she'd been complicit in such evil. You didn't know, Cassia said softly, squeezing her hand. She fooled everyone. That's what made her dangerous. But I should have seen. Evil doesn't always look evil, Cassia interrupted gently. Sometimes it wears a beautiful face and speaks kind words. You're not to blame. The woman wept with relief, and Cassia stayed with her until she fell into exhausted sleep. Aldrich found her there an hour later. You should rest too. You've been up for 2 days straight. So have you. She noted the fresh bandages on his arms, the healing burns from where Seraphine's magic had caught him. Did the healers clear you? Physically, I'm fine. The curse heals most things. He touched his chest. But something else changed. My wolf, it's different, quieter, more at peace. Because you're not fighting it anymore, Cassia observed. And because we completed what Alira started, justice has been served. Thanks to you. He pulled her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed from exhaustion. Cassia, what happens now? With us. I mean, the bond is reforming, but I'm not her, Cassia finished. I know. And I don't want you loving me because I remind you of her. I want. She struggled to find words. I want you to choose me, Cassia. Not Alira's echo. Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. Then he took her hand and placed it over his heart. Feel that? She did. The steady, strong beat. And beneath it, something else, the mate bond, pulsing in rhythm. That beats for you, he said. Not for who you were in another life. Not for memories of Alira. For you, Cassia Ashwood, the woman who walked into my chambers and shattered my carefully constructed numbness, who saw me at my worst and didn't run, who conquered death and came back stronger. His voice roughened with emotion. I loved Elira with everything I had. And yes, part of me will always carry that love. But what I feel for you, it's new. It's different. It's a choice I make every moment we're together. Even knowing I'll never be exactly who you lost, especially knowing that. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. Because you're something better. You're Elira's courage, plus Cassia's compassion. Her fire and your gentleness. Her memories and your fresh perspective. You're what happens when love refuses to accept death as final. We're a miracle, Cassia whispered. We're a mess, Aldrich corrected with a slight smile. But we're a beautiful mess. And we'll figure it out together. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kira entered, her arm in a sling, but her eyes bright with purpose. Your Majesty, your Majesties? She looked between them uncertainly. The council is demanding an emergency session. They want to know what happens now. With Seraphine arrested, Lord Brennan dead as a traitor, and, she gestured to Cassia, with her. Cassia and Aldrich exchanged glances. The real work was just beginning. The great hall of Thornhaven Palace had never been so silent. Every noble, every servant, every guard stood frozen, as King Aldrich made his announcement. Cassia stood beside him on the raised dais, her hand firmly in his, trying not to tremble under hundreds of staring eyes. I know you have questions, Aldrich's voice carried across the vast space. I know this seems impossible, but I ask that you hear the full truth before passing judgment. Truth? Lord Garrett stepped forward, his face skeptical. Your Majesty, with respect. You're asking us to believe that a servant girl is your dead mate reborn. This is madness. Is it? Kira emerged from the crowd, still bandaged from the garden battle. More mad than a woman secretly murdering for 7 years while sitting on the royal council? More impossible than undead rising in the royal crypts? She gestured to Cassia. I've seen her power. I've seen what she can do. This is no ordinary servant. Power proves nothing, Lady Ashford interjected. Any witch can throw light around. It doesn't make her our queen. Then test me, Cassia said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Ask me things. Only Elira would know. Let your scholars examine me with whatever magic they deem necessary. I have nothing to hide. A murmur rippled through the crowd. An elderly woman stepped forward. High Scholar Morgana, keeper of the royal archives, who'd served the palace for 50 years. Very well, the scholar said, her milky eyes sharp despite her age. Queen Elira and I shared a secret, something she told only me, documented nowhere. If you truly carry her memories, you'll know what it is. Cassia closed her eyes, reaching for Elira's memories. They came easier now, less like drowning, and more like opening a familiar book. She sought a conversation in the archive's deepest level, two women sharing wine and secrets. You told her about your daughter? Cassia said softly. The one you bore out of wedlock at 16. The child you gave to a fishing village on the coast to raise as their own. You visit her twice a year, pretending to research maritime trade records. Her name is Alara. She just turned 32, and has twins. The hall erupted. High Scholar Morgana's composure shattered, tears streaming down her weathered face. No one knows. In 50 years, no one has ever known. Only Elira, because she caught me crying one night and refused to let me suffer alone. She loved you, Cassia continued, memories flooding through. She said you were the mother she wished she'd had. And she made her promise never to tell, never to judge. That everyone deserves secrets and dignity. Morgana crossed the dais and took Cassia's hands in her, trembling ones. You're really her. Blessed ancestors. You're really our queen returned. But not everyone was convinced. Lord Garrett remained skeptical. Memories can be stolen, extracted with magic. This proves nothing, except that she's a skilled witch. Then I'll prove it another way. Cassia turned to face the full assembly. Elira died with unfinished business. Justice for more than just herself. Seraphine has been murdering for over a decade, and King Aldrich's mother was her first victim. Aldrich stiffened. My mother died of a wasting illness. No. Cassia's voice was gentle but firm. She was poisoned. Same method. Same killer. Seraphine has been murdering for years, and your mother discovered something about your brother's death. She was going to expose Seraphine, so Seraphine acted first. Why didn't Alira tell me? Aldrich's voice cracked. If she knew, she was going to. The night she died. She wanted to gather all the evidence first, make sure the case was ironclad. She couldn't risk Seraphine escaping justice. Cassia's throat tightened with Alira's regret. She died trying to protect you, trying to give you the truth about your family. Aldrich sank into his throne as if his legs had given out. My mother. My brother. Both murdered. And I never knew. I never even suspected. You were manipulated by someone who's been playing this game for years. Kira stepped forward with Alira's journal, open to damning pages. But now we have proof. Everything documented. Multiple conspirators have already confessed under interrogation. Seraphine's network of corruption runs deep, but it's unraveling. How many? Aldrich's question was barely audible. How many others did she kill? At least 7 that we can prove, Kira said grimly. Possibly more. Anyone who got close to discovering the truth. The hall erupted in chaos, nobles shouting, servants weeping, guards demanding action. Through it all, Cassia watched Aldrich crumble. The frozen king, always so controlled, breaking under the weight of revelations that rewrote his entire understanding of his family's history. She moved to him instinctively, kneeling before the throne and taking his hands. I'm so sorry. Alira wanted to spare you this pain. She thought if she handled it quietly, you'd never have to know how deep the betrayal went. But she died trying to protect me, he whispered. She died, and I couldn't even protect her. You're protecting her now. You're finishing what she started. Cassia squeezed his hands. This is why I came back. Not just for us, but for justice. For everyone Seraphine hurt. For the truth that needed to be told. Aldrich looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. And now? What happens to us? She stood, pulling him up with her to face the assembled court. Now we heal. We rebuild. And we make sure nothing like this ever happens again. She turned to address the hall, her voice carrying with unexpected authority. Seraphine will face trial for multiple murders, treason, and the practice of forbidden dark magic. The evidence is overwhelming. But this isn't just about punishment, it's about healing. This kingdom has been wounded by secrets and lies for too long. That ends now. And who are you to make such declarations? Lord Garrett challenged. You're still just a servant girl, regardless of whose soul you claim to carry. She's my mate, Aldrich said, finding his voice again. Recognized by the mate bond that's reforming as we speak. Carrying the memories and essence of my first queen. The scholars can verify. The mages can test. But I don't need their confirmation. I know who she is. He looked at Cassia with something fierce and possessive. And I claim her. Officially, before all witnesses. But your majesty, Lady Ashford protested. There are protocols. She hasn't been trained in royal duties. She doesn't know our ways. Then she'll learn. Aldrich cut her off. Just as Alira learned. Just as every queen before her learned. Or are you suggesting my judgment is so poor that I'd choose an unsuitable mate? The nobles fell silent, because challenging the king's choice of mate was essentially challenging the mate bond itself, something sacred, even in political circles. High Scholar Morgana stepped forward again. I propose a solution, a period of transition, let's say 3 months. During this time, Cassia will receive intensive training in royal protocols, history, and statecraft. She'll be presented to the people, allow them to see her, hear her story. At the end of 3 months, we hold a formal coronation, and let the kingdom decide if they accept her as queen. And if they don't? Cassia asked. Then you'll still be my mate, Aldrich said firmly. Queen or not, that doesn't change. But I believe they'll accept you, once they see you as I do, not as a replacement for Alira, but as something new, something stronger, because you've lived 2 lives. A young voice piped up, from the crowd. I accept her. A child pushed forward, maybe 8 years old, with bright eyes and tangled hair. My mama says the old queen used to visit the lower districts. that she helped sick people and played with us kids. Will you do that too? Cassia knelt to the child's level, feeling something warm bloom in her chest. I will. I promise. Because that's what queens should do, care for all their people, not just the nobles. Even servants? The child asked. Especially servants, Cassia said with a smile, because I know what it's like to be invisible, and I'm going to make sure no one in this kingdom ever feels that way again. The child beamed and ran back to her mother, but her acceptance rippled through the crowd. Other servants began nodding, whispering to each other. Because they'd known Cassia, they'd worked alongside her, and they knew she was genuinely one of them, someone who'd lived their struggles, understood their hardships. 3 months, Lord Garrett finally said. Still skeptical, but outvoted. But she must prove herself worthy. Not just of being queen, but of being trusted with the kingdom's future. Agreed, Aldrich said. And in return, this council will submit to a full audit. If Seraphine had accomplices in her crimes, they will be found and brought to justice. No one is above scrutiny. The Lord paled but couldn't protest without looking guilty. As the crowd dispersed, still buzzing with shock and speculation, Cassia felt the weight of what she'd just committed to. 3 months to prove she could be queen, to learn everything Alira had known and more, to convince an entire kingdom that resurrection was real, and she was worthy. Overwhelming? Aldrich asked quietly as they finally escaped back to his chambers. Terrifying, she admitted. What if I fail? What if 3 months isn't enough? Then we ask for 3 more. He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. But you won't fail. You know why? Why? Because Alira chose you. Out of all the vessels her soul could have found, all the bodies it could have reborn into, it chose yours. A servant girl with nothing. Someone who'd understand the kingdom from the bottom up. Someone strong enough to survive what's coming. Cassia pulled back. What's coming? Aldrich's expression grew grim. Seraphine didn't work alone. She mentioned others during her rantings in the crypt. Other nobles, possibly other kingdoms involved in a conspiracy we've only begun to uncover. And they'll target me, Cassia realized. Because I'm the witness who can expose everything. Yes. He touched her face tenderly. Which is why the next 3 months aren't just about training you. They're about keeping you alive long enough to finish what Alira started. Despite the ominous words, Cassia felt oddly calm. She'd already died once. She'd conquered death itself and come back stronger. Whatever threats remained, she'd face them the same way with courage, with love, and with the certainty that some bonds were too strong for anything to break. Then let's begin, she said. Show me how to be a queen. And Aldrich did. Over the following weeks, Cassia learned to navigate the complex world of royal politics. High Scholar Morgana taught her history and protocol. Kira trained her in self-defense and awareness of threats. Aldrich himself guided her through the nuances of leadership, when to be firm, when to show mercy, when to listen, and when to command. But the most important lessons came from unexpected places, from servants who taught her which nobles treated staff with respect, from merchants who explained trade routes and economic pressures, from common folk who shared their struggles and hopes. Cassia didn't just learn to be Alira's replacement. She learned to be herself, a queen who'd walked both paths, who understood suffering because she'd lived it, who could bridge the gap between nobles and commoners because she'd been both. And through it all, the mate bond with Aldrich grew stronger. Not the explosive, fated connection of first mates, but something deeper, something chosen. Something earned through trust and shared purpose, and the quiet moments between crises. They learned each other, his tendency to brood and her habit of overthinking, his dry humor and her earnest optimism, the way he took his tea and the way she hummed while working. Small things that built into something unshakable. 3 months passed in a blur of lessons, and late nights, and stolen moments of peace. And when the day of coronation arrived, Cassia stood before the assembled kingdom, not as Alira Ravenshade reborn, but as herself, Cassia Ashwood, the twice-born queen, the miracle who proved that love was stronger than death. The coronation of Queen Cassia Ashwood was unlike anything Thornhaven had witnessed in its 1,000-year history. The traditional ceremony required the monarch to kneel before the High Council and accept the crown from their hands, symbolizing that rulers served at the pleasure of the realm's nobility. But Aldrich had changed the protocol. You're not being given a crown, he'd explained during preparations. You're claiming one. There's a difference. So instead of kneeling, Cassia stood. Instead of the council placing the crown, Aldrich did it himself, his mate, his equal, his partner recognizing her authority before any noble could grant or deny it. The great hall fell silent as he lifted the delicate circlet, not the heavy formal crown of previous queens, but something new, forged from silver and gold twisted together, set with crystals that caught light like captured stars. It represented balance, life and death, past and present. Cassia and Alira unified. I crown you not because you need my permission, Aldrich said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, but because you've already proven yourself worthy 1,000 times over. Queen Cassia, the twice born, may your reign be just, your heart be true, and your people be blessed. He placed the crown on her head, and the moment he did, something extraordinary happened. Light bloomed from the crown, washing over everyone present, and for just a moment, they felt it the thinness of the veil between life and death, the presence of loved ones watching from beyond, the beautiful truth that consciousness continued, even after the body failed. It should have frightened them. Instead, many wept with relief, because feeling beyond the veil showed them that death wasn't an ending to be feared, it was a transition to be respected. When the light faded, Cassia turned to face her people. No longer a servant, no longer just a vessel for a dead queen's soul. Fully herself complex, powerful, imperfect, and exactly right. I won't promise to be perfect, she said, her voice steady and clear. I won't pretend I know everything about ruling, but I promise this. I will remember what it's like to be powerless, to be invisible, to be afraid, and I will use that knowledge to build a kingdom where no one has to feel that way again. She looked at the assembled nobles, some supportive, some still skeptical, all watching to see what kind of queen she'd become. I know many of you question whether a former servant can rule, whether someone who carries 2 lifetimes in one body can be trusted, whether the impossible miracle of my existence is blessing or curse. Let me answer that question. She descended from the dais, walking among them something no queen had done during a coronation in centuries. I am both Cassia Ashwood, who scrubbed your floors and knew your secrets because servants hear everything, and I am Alira Ravenshade, who loved this kingdom enough to die, trying to protect it. I carry the memories of both lives, the perspective of both roles, and that makes me uniquely qualified to see what this kingdom needs. She stopped before the young girl from the council meeting the Russer, one who'd accepted her first. What's your name? Cassia asked gently. Liana, your majesty, the girl stammered. Liana, do you know what I've learned from living 2 lives? Cassia asked, speaking to the girl, but meaning her words for everyone. That the things that divide us noble from common, servant from master, living from dead, they're not as solid as we think. They're just lines we draw, and lines can be redrawn. She addressed the full assembly now. This is my first decree as queen. No person in this kingdom will be invisible. Servants will have the right to petition for justice. Common folk will have representation in governance, and anyone regardless of birth or station who shows merit and character will have opportunity to rise. Second decree, Aldrich added, his voice resonating with authority. The investigation into Seraphine's conspiracy will continue. Every noble house, every trade guild, every institution will be examined. Those who served corruption will face justice. Those who resisted it will be honored, and those who looked away will be held accountable for their silence. And third, Cassia said, her eyes finding every face in the crowd, this kingdom will remember what was lost. We will honor Queen Alira's memory, not with monuments or empty words, but by building the just, compassionate realm she died trying to create. Every law we pass, every decision we make, will be measured against that standard. The nobles who'd supported her began to kneel. Then the servants. Then the common folk, one by one, until the entire hall knelt before their twice-born queen, not out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine hope. Because she was something new, something impossible, a miracle that proved death wasn't final, that love could conquer anything, that even the lowest could rise to the highest if given the chance. The coronation feast lasted until dawn. Nobles and commoners mingled in ways that would have been scandalous under previous reigns. Cassia moved through the celebration, talking to everyone's servant and noble alike. She remembered names, asked about families, listened to concerns, and people responded, because she spoke to them not as subjects, but as equals. As the sun rose, Aldrich found her on the same balcony, where they'd first discussed the strange occurrences in the palace. Tired? He asked. Exhausted, she admitted. Being queen is harder than scrubbing floors. But more rewarding? She considered. Different. When I scrubbed floors, I could see the immediate result, something dirty becoming clean. Ruling is more abstract. I make decrees and establish policies, but I won't know if they worked for years. Then trust the process, Aldrich said, pulling her close. You're not meant to fix everything immediately. You're meant to set things in motion. Plant seeds that will grow into forests. Poetic for a cursed king. I have many depths. He kissed her softly. Speaking of which, I have a coronation gift for you. He pulled out a small wooden box, worn with age. Inside was a book hand-bound, pages yellowed with time, filled with neat handwriting. My grandmother's journal, Cassia breathed, recognizing the script. But this was lost when her house burned. Kira found it, Aldrich explained, hidden in papers confiscated from Seraphine. She'd been tracking your bloodline for years. He opened to a marked page. Read this. Cassia's eyes scanned the entry, dated 16 years ago, the day she was born. The child came during the eclipse. As predicted, the last soul walker of my direct line, born under the sign of balance. I can see her future spreading before me. Like a map, she will die and return, love and lose, and love again, break and remake herself until she becomes what the kingdom needs. Not just a healer, not just a queen, but the bridge between worlds, the proof that love transcends death, the answer to a question that hasn't been asked yet. I wish I could stay to guide her. But my time is ending, and hers is just beginning. So I leave this journal as my gift. Let her know that every moment of suffering had purpose. Every loss was preparation. Every impossible choice was training for the impossible life she's meant to lead. Cassia, my darling granddaughter, by the time you read this, you'll have died and returned. You'll have loved a cursed king and become a twice-born queen. You'll have fought corruption and won. And you'll wonder if it was worth it. If all the pain and fear and grief were necessary. They were. Every moment. Every tear. Every impossible choice. Because the universe needed you. Not who you were as Cassia alone, or who you might have become as a Lyra reborn, but the magnificent combination of both. The queen who understands suffering because she's lived it. The woman who knows death intimately because she's conquered it. The miracle who proves that love is stronger than any magic, any curse, any force in existence. You were always meant for this, and I'm so, so proud of you. All my love, grandmother. Cassia's tears fell on the aged paper, and Aldrich held her while she wept, not from sadness, but from overwhelming emotion. Her grandmother had known, had seen all of this, had guided her soul even from beyond death. She was like me, Cassia realized. A soul walker. More powerful than I knew. She didn't just deliver babies, she guided souls to their destined vessels. She made sure Lyra's soul would find me when the time was right. She gave us both a gift, Aldrich said. Me, the mate I thought I'd lost forever. You, a purpose that transcends either of your individual lives. And the kingdom, a queen unlike any that came before. They stood together as the sun climbed higher, painting Thornhaven in shades of gold and silver, life and death, light and shadow, perfectly balanced. Below, the city stirred to life. Bakers opening shops, merchants setting up stalls, children playing in streets. Guards patrolling with renewed purpose, knowing their queen had walked their paths, understood their struggles. A kingdom healing, changing, growing into something better than it had been. What happens now? Cassia asked. Now we rule, Aldrich said simply. We settle disputes and make treaties and attend tedious council meetings. We do all the boring, necessary work of actually governing. And we live, he added, his eyes warm. We laugh and argue and make mistakes and learn from them. We have quiet mornings and chaotic evenings and moments where we wonder what we've gotten ourselves into. We be human or as human as a twice-born soul walker and cursed king can be. Sounds exhausting. Sounds perfect. Cassia leaned into him, feeling the mate bond pulse between them stronger than ever. Permanent. Unbreakable. She thought about the girl she'd been, scrubbing floors and hiding her strange dreams, She thought about the queen who died, trying to expose corruption, and she thought about who she'd become, the impossible synthesis of both lives. I'm ready, she said. For what? For everything. The boring council meetings and the thrilling crises, the political maneuvering and the genuine connections with people who need help, the weight of the crown and the lightness of knowing I don't have to carry it alone. She took his hand, squeezing tight. For a lifetime, this lifetime of building something beautiful from ruins. A bell tolled in the city below. The new day beginning. New petitions to hear, new decisions to make, new challenges to face. Ready to address your first royal council as queen? Aldrich asked. Ready to stand beside me? She countered. They grinned at each other, partners, mates, rulers, survivors, miracles. The impossible king and his twice-born queen. The cursed wolf and the soul walker. Two people who'd found each other across death itself and decided that love was worth fighting for. Their story had seemed finished when Alira died 7 years ago. But stories don't end, they transform. Souls don't disappear, they find new vessels. And love doesn't fade, it persists, adapts, conquers everything in its path until even death itself has to admit defeat. Cassia Ashwood had been born during an eclipse. She'd died as Alira Ravenshade, trying to bring justice to the corrupt. And she'd returned as something new, a queen who'd walked both paths, carried both lives, and become exactly what her kingdom needed. Not perfect, not all-knowing, but real and powerful, and determined to build a future where no one had to hide what they were, where death was honored but not feared, where love was recognized as the strongest magic of all. She was home, she was whole, she was ready, and Thornhaven would never be the same. Sometimes souls refuse to let death be the end. Sometimes love is strong enough to rewrite the rules. Sometimes the impossible becomes real because two people decide that together they're unstoppable. This is what happens when an alpha king loses his mate and spends 7 years in grief, only to have her soul return in the body of a servant who smelled like his lost love. This is what happens when death tries to keep true mates apart. Death doesn't win. It never does. Love always finds a way home.